to everyone who has joined us today. I'd like to welcome everyone to our session called Sense and Sense, hosted by HConX Ka-Ching 2022. I'm Muskan Prabhugaonkar, your host and moderator for the session today. In today's session, we define the factors determining financial freedom and assess the effectiveness of the schemes implemented in an attempt to redefine modern financial freedom. I'd like to introduce the audience to our two esteemed and experienced speakers present with us today. Our first panelist is Mr. Basim Al Ahmadi, who is the co-founder of one of the world's leading publications that provides political risk analysis, Global Risk Insights. Mr. Basim is the founder and managing director of BZF Consultancy, a London-based real estate advisory business. He holds a master's in theory and history of international relations from the London School of Economics. At the LSE, he was the founding president of an award-winning political risk and investment society. He's also managed the Middle East practice at SET Advisory and a strategy consultancy based in London. Our second panelist is Mr. Manish Advani, founder and CEO of MIMO Potential. He has approximately 2 decades of experience of working for organizations ranging from SMEs to large B2B and B2C companies across geographies. Mr. Manish has worked in senior positions for some of the leading companies such as Microsoft Canada, Schindler, Jaguar, and Land Rover, the New Jersey Department of Transportation, and many others. His do-good initiatives have won him the International Green Apple Award for India at the House of Commons in the British Parliament, amongst others. Welcome, sir. It's an honor to have you both here with us this afternoon. How are you all doing today?
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Muskan. So you're doing well now because looking at you, your name is Muskan. So, the moment you, utter your name, Muskan, smile comes on your face.
Yes, sir.
So, Basim, Muskan in Hindi means, in English means smile.
Oh, well, my name in Arabic means smile. There we go.
Wow.
There we go. We're all smiling. There we go.
Yeah, everybody around the world badly needs to smile now.
Exactly.
Smile can change the world.
We need to spread it.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So before I start the session, I just wanted to inform the audience that we would be answering audience questions at the end of the session. So please send in your questions on Zoom chat to either Archisha Malhotra or Taran Shukr. So I'd like to start the session now by asking the both of you, since the both of you have owned or currently own businesses, I would like to ask about the role that financial freedom has played in your lives and ventures. Mr. Manish, would you like to start?
Sure. See, financial freedom plays a big role. I mean, the reason I was able to start my business was because I was in a stable condition. The second option was to raise funds from the market. But I felt, I want to bootstrap my company, and then probably at a later date, I will, if required, I'm going to raise funds. Otherwise, I'm going to build the organization on my own strength. So yes, financial freedom actually plays a big role. But although we talk about financial freedom, financial security is also important. I think more important because that gives you the foundation. And since childhood, my grandmother used to often ingrain this one principle in me. We were raised in actually 2 proverbs I would often hear from her. One was, Furi Furi Talav, and another was Kana Mena Kehje. These were the 2 proverbs. So Furi Furi Talav in English means drop becomes an ocean. And Kana Mela Kehje refers to anything can happen at any moment. Because she had first-hand experience of India-Pakistan divide. She came from Karachi. In those days, it was in India. But when she migrated to India, she migrated the entire family, my grandfather and all the children, my mom and her siblings. They migrated with nothing. They were refugees living in shanties. But these proverbs actually, in that kind of situation, I don't think these made a big difference, but she followed them because, that was the worst eventuality which you can experience. Worse than COVID, where you have to leave your home. You have to leave. In those days, there wasn't like international fund transfer. We didn't have any kind of international banking. So they had to overnight from a life of royalty, they were into life of poverty. So that's an extreme case, but throughout our life, I mean, when I was growing up as a kid, these two proverbs were like almost every week ingrained into me. Drop by drop becomes an ocean. Anything can happen at any moment. And they both align with each other. And that I believe these two had a role to play. I mean, she was not a graduate from Harvard or, had any big degrees. I mean, she was not even an SSC pass. She was ninth standard. She couldn't pursue because they had to move to India. But she left her education halfway, but still her knowledge in the area of the financial aspect was so high that it has played a game-changing role in my life.
Hi, sir. Sorry, I got disconnected for a bit. It was a
Yes, so
Wi-Fi.
that's what something. So I feel, yeah. So adding to that, I mean, one of the things which I feel kids in today's, environment, especially the kids who are blessed with all kinds of facilities. I mean, one thing which I feel is missing is value for money. At one end, we are talking about reduce, recycle, reuse. And I think if the element of sustainability is bought in, I think it can play a big difference. I mean, people need to value money, especially the ones who have. That's something which I thought would add value to this question.
Mr. Basim, would you like to speak?
No, very interesting, Manish. I mean, sustainability obviously is a key theme and obviously a consideration which many young people should keep in mind when starting a business. It's a trend which will unavoidably continue, and for good reason. From my perspective, I think starting BZF Consultancy, which is my real estate advisory firm, and Global Risk Insights, which is the non-for-profit that I co-founded about 9 years ago, it made me realize how lucky I am. It's only when you start a business at times do you realize that you are in a privileged position when it comes to your surroundings, your family support, the financial resources you can tap into, and in my opinion, only emphasized for me that if you are in a position where you can start your own business and fulfill your own dreams, you should go for it and you should pursue that path. And what you do also realize is there's not a lot of time. There's this whole idea of, well, you have time to start a business, but you don't get many chances. And I think my only encouragement to those in the audience is that if you have an idea, you have those around you that can assist you, not only monetarily, but in terms of moral support and encouragement. If you can start a business that can make a difference, and there are so many fascinating businesses out there that are making such a social, big social impact, and pointing to the subject of sustainability. If you can start a business that can make a difference, you do not necessarily need huge financial resources. If you have a good idea, there's a lot of liquidity and a lot of capital in the markets today that will be able to deploy capital and assist your growth. But indeed, it's a reality today that those that come from certain backgrounds are able, that maybe have good connections or come from good schools or are surrounded by certain, people around them, unfortunately have a head start. And that for me also opened my eyes that I believe that all of us in society should have equal opportunity, but that is not the case. Whether it's in India or it's in the West or around the world, there are huge amounts of economic inequality and a lack of equal opportunity that I think needs to be addressed. And obviously we can discuss that throughout the talk. But I think that's an experience of starting my own business. It shed light. It made me realize even further that I am very lucky, and there are many of those that do not have the environment at times to start your own business, but that should not put you off from going for it. And there are many avenues to start a business, and there's a lot of capital being deployed. So that's sort of from my experience, and it's great fun, right? Starting your own business, and I encourage people to do it. And we need young people to do so.
Yes, sir. So I'd like to ask you my first question. The definition of financial freedom is often linked to financial security, but with the evolving landscapes of financial activities all over the world, do you think that this definition is not just about wealth accumulation and safety with regard to the future, but also the degree with which one can utilize that wealth? Mr. Manish, would you like to start with this one?
Yeah, so actually it makes, I mean, some time ago I heard that, I mean, someone said, I was born intelligent, but education messed up my life. I agree to some extent, but I don't agree to a large extent because it depends. I mean, you all, I mean, if you are, I mean, if a doctor is, or if an individual is given a knife, I mean, he can murder someone, or if he's a doctor, he can cure someone with the same knife. So yes, wealth is there, but now how the wealth is used is something which is important. Before, I mean, evolving on the financial front, are people evolving around purpose? Do people have purpose in life? Otherwise, we'll get into a circus wherein the wealth is misused. Wealth is misused
Yes.
for different reasons. I mean, wars, terrorism, all these things. I mean, it's a misuse of wealth. From if you analyze it from a different angle. I believe nobody wins in war. If two countries are getting in a war, I mean, both of them pay a big price in certain, at certain level, and the price is in form of the number of people they lose, the amount of money which they waste in this. So I think if more and more people are center their lives around purpose, I think then it would be easier to harmonize people align people to a common vision. And then in the world which we live in today, I mean, we are global citizens. We are global citizens in the digital world. There are no borders. I mean, you can see Basim has joined us from London. There's no visa he had to apply for to speak to all of us, right? Within instantaneously, all you did was you just sent him a link and he connected with all of us from London, right from London.
So well, I wish I'm in Belgium at the moment, actually, with family. But I wish I was in London right now. Not that I love being with my family, but London, you can't beat that.
So see, I'm in Belgium. I mean, he's from Belgium and still connected with us. And this, I mean, reminds me of, a few years ago, I happened to travel to Singapore and, and it was actually this time of the year. I was scheduled to travel and the tickets were too expensive, we're talking about financial freedom, security. So as I just said, every drop down. So the only ticket which I was getting at a reasonable price was to go via Malaysia, and I had to spend 14 hours in transit. And I'll cut this story short. So I was actually looking at different places I can visit in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, but I didn't come across anything which excites me because I've seen towers in Burj Khalifa in Dubai and in US. Sears Towers and the 911. I mean, I was there during 911, so I'd seen the WTC towers and many other towers. So what I did, I sent out a message on social media saying that, is there anyone interesting I could meet? And within minutes, I got a message from few people and one guy showed up. I mean, I'm just cutting the story short. So when I bumped into him, he came with a big bag and that big bag had, breakfast, lunch and dinner, which his wife made. She woke up at 5 a.m. And I asked him, why did she took all the trouble? I mean, I don't even know you. We are meeting for the first time. So he said, you are a guest in our country. And we still follow the ancient traditional Indian practice of Atithi Deva Bhava, which is, any guest who comes to our country has to be treated like God. And I almost had tears in my eyes. When I got back to India, I sent out a message on social media. This was the experience I had in Malaysia. And within minutes, actually, I'm not, cooking this up. I mean, Basim would be surprised. There were people who from Lebanon who sent a message saying that if you happen to be in Lebanon, we would be happy to host you or anyone for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
I'm glad to hear.
Yes, so I think it's very important to promote the right culture, promote purpose across the world, and harmonize people towards something higher, towards unity. I mean, in the Western world, they had a whole propaganda on Black Lives Matter. I say everybody lives matter. Why only Black Lives Matter? Everyone's life matters, right? Why discrimination at any level? I mean, I think run a campaign which is on a much bigger scale and a bigger level. Everyone's lives matters. Period. I mean, why only Black? Everybody's lives matter. So I think that inclusivity and focusing on these finer elements of purpose and culture would ensure that wealth is used, the wealth is in right hands and it's used in a meaningful purpose, and to ensure that we are moving towards sustainable and inclusive growth.
Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Basim, would you like to share your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I think number one, I think financial freedom is number one tied to the broader macro inequalities that exist in society, and also your status in society. I think, unfortunately, in some societies, if you are from a certain, from a certain background, if you are from a certain creed, from a certain orientation, you are discriminated in society, you're blocked off from certain job opportunities and certain life chances. And I think the duty of societies across different political systems is to provide all people with the opportunity to thrive and to succeed. So I think we need to start with that first premise of give everyone equal opportunity. This does not mean that everyone will be as wealthy, as successful, or as happy in their life. But you need to give all people from different backgrounds the opportunities to succeed. So there needs to be a framework to begin with, to provide all people with an opportunity and to avoid discrimination in the markets, whether it's in the job place, in the housing markets, et cetera, et cetera. I would say the second point I want to probably make is there's a lot of people who, for example, in the United States, I mean, they gave around, I think it was around 400 to 500 billion, I think just under 500 billion in charitable contributions in the United States last year. I think it was in 2021. Someone correct me if I'm wrong here. Which actually suggests as well, and this does not have to come from the wealthiest in society. I mean, it reflects, and I'm sure this is the case in India and around the world, that people are charitable by nature. And I think people, no matter what status they have or what financial status they have or how much wealth they have, I think most people are looking to give and to try to solve societal problems. But I think what that points towards is that it's not enough for people to be charitable, and for people, no matter, even if they have little, but they want to give, governments and civil society at large need to come together, and business need to come together to solve problems. I mean, we see that in the UK, for example. I mean, there's a lot of initiatives between government, business, and non-for-profits or civil society coming together and trying to solve issues like homelessness, trying to solve problems like crime. And I think you can't simply just throw money at issues. You need to have the right people coming together at the decision-making table to actually address issues. Now, money is important to solve issues, don't get me wrong. You need to have a budget, you need to have capital in order to solve societal problems, and to invest in public services, and to invest in certain initiatives. But having the right people around the table, I think, is very, very important. So I think those are the sort of two sort of summary points. Is number one, on an equal opportunities basis, giving the people the opportunity to be financially free and to achieve financial prosperity and economic prosperity. But also the second point is you need, you cannot rely also on people being charitable. That's the other side of the equation. You can't rely on people from all different walks of life to be charitable. You need government involved to pull different actors together to actually get things done, and to provide the capital, but also the organizational structure to solve societal problems and public policy issues.
Thank you, sir. Sir, you just spoke about certain sections of society being discriminated. So given the importance of digital transactions in today's day and age, especially with the pandemic, there are alarming statistics. Yeah, there are alarming statistics in the United Nations Capital Development Fund report. It states that women are 12% less likely to own a phone than men, and 35% less likely to have internet access remarkably reducing their financial freedom. So what would you put this down to? Like, do you think there are any schemes in work that you would like to inform our audience to change the statistics?
You want me to maybe start, Manish?
Sure. I mean, I thought,
No, yeah,
I was actually a bit confused. I thought it's addressed to you, so you can start.
no worries.
Sure.
I think, can you just rephrase the last part of the question?
We would like to ask you if you had any schemes that would work to change the statistics that I just mentioned.
And can you actually maybe go through the whole thing again, just in terms of the percentages?
Sir. Yeah. Yes. Sure, sir. So I just, we were talking about discrimination of certain sections of society. So there's a United Nations Capital Development Fund report that stated that women are 12% less likely to own a phone than men, and 35% less likely to have internet access, which is remarkably reducing their financial freedom. So do you think there would be anything that we could do to change the statistics?
I think there's a few things on a global level. And this does not just apply to one particular country. I think the most important step to take is education, right? We need to all recognize that women, number one, are underrepresented in government. They're underrepresented in business. They're underrepresented in civil society. And there needs to come to a point where that education in schools promote gender equality and encourage female empowerment. Number two, that the homes, right? Because at the end of the day, your education does not only come from school, it comes from your home. That at home, these notions of fairness and equality and treating the opposite gender with empowerment and respect and admiration, all of these values need to be taught at home. Now, the major challenge of public policy is that governments can do all the efforts they can in terms of publicly advocating for gender equality or equality across different creeds and races, etc. They can pass laws to ensure that there's no discrimination, which of course is the first step. But the limit is you cannot dictate what happens in people's homes, what is said in people's homes, what lessons are being passed to the next generation. But I think the first step of governments and countries, passing laws to at least to make sure that there's no discrimination against any person from any group is always a fantastic first step. And then obviously promoting education and promoting tolerance. And this is where civil society comes in. In places like India, I mean, such a vibrant civil society, that can, encourage participation of all groups, of marginalized groups in the economy, in the workforce, encouraging this quite a few organizations, even in the UK, that are working in emerging markets to promote female entrepreneurship, to provide capital to female entrepreneurs. So I think there are major studies that when women are provided a loan to start a business or provided a loan to help their families, women spend the money more wisely, more effectively than men do. So it begs the question why women are underrepresented when it comes to starting their own businesses and raising capital, why more money goes to male-owned businesses than female-owned businesses. We need to rethink these premises because a society that does not empower women is not empowered as a society. So we need to rethink these premises. Of course, it comes in, obviously also respecting certain cultures and traditions, and every country is different in the way they do, that they handle questions of public policy, of course. But I think we need to start with the premise of equal opportunity for all and respect for all.
Thank you, sir. So Manish, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
Yes, so I would say, to drive this change, I mean, there is need for circulating some good and powerful story, because, invariably we all as human beings are driven by stories. If you're watching a particular movie, I mean, if that movie or you admire that particular actor, you admire him for a story. In India, many people admire Mahendra Singh Dhoni. They admire him because of the story which he's created. Or whatever is done, whatever he has done is part of his story, which actually, inspires us, and which is something which kind of makes us, or attracts us towards him. So I think, stories like, especially in the area of financial security and freedom, I mean, one thing which comes to my mind, Infosys happens to be one of the leading IT companies in the world. And if we go back, I mean, although the leaders of Infosys are in different panels, different conferences, sharing their thoughts on XYZ matter, how they're going to grow their business, and many other things. I mean, if you go back into their story, it was the women who were the wives of these co-founders, multiple founders, who actually mortgaged their jewelry to fund that company.
Yes.
They were the original private equity investors in that company. So women in Indian subcontinent have played a big role, especially, I mean, India is known for making, or women are known for accumulating gold. Or, I mean, that's the safest or the best investment from a long-term perspective, which they have made since years and since decades, and which have played a game-changing role. And if they wouldn't have done that, I think a lot would have been different in the country. A lot would have been different in terms of economic development and XYZ things. Even when it came to independence, I mean, recently on 26th January, they installed the statue of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. I mean, if you go back in history again, he ran a campaign, "Tum mujhe khoon do, main tujhe azadi dunga." But then I think one part of the campaign was that many people came forward, especially women, who came forward, and they actually, shared their jewelry in the interest of the country. So from financial stability perspective, I mean, by nature, women are caring by nature. So that the element of care also expands to caring for the future generations, caring for the environment, caring for children, caring for, pretty much everything which is around there. And if we leverage on that,
Yes.
if we harness on that, if we align that for a larger purpose by including them in the system, I think a lot will change around us. Rather than feeling insecure, many a times people feel insecure. I mean, I've come across, women who have shared their stories of grief, where one of the women said, when I got pregnant, I lost a promotion because the boss felt she won't be able to perform. I mean, either who the hell is he to decide whether she'll be, if she doesn't perform, yes, you can actually take the drastic step, but without even, giving her a chance, how can you, make that statement that she won't be able to perform because she's got pregnant? So there's so many things which need to, at a deeper level, if we dive deeper, there are underlying, I mean, there are so many issues which need to be addressed. So many issues.
Yes. Thank you so much. So I'm sure we all agree with you. So you just spoke about education. You all both spoke about education. So a follow-up to that would be, so to what extent are basic literacy and financial literacy correlated? Given the poor quality of education and the relatively high illiteracy rate of 25.96% in India, how difficult do you think is it to achieve a higher rate of financial literacy, which forms the basis of financial freedom? Basim, so would you like to start?
Sure. I mean,
Yes.
I am far from an expert on local Indian dynamics, but I think more generally, financial, and it's a great question because financial literacy is one of the most overlooked topics when it comes to public policy. I think governments tend to overlook the fact that in most curriculums, in sort of educate, in high school, middle school, growing up as a youngster, you're not really taught the fundamentals of how to manage money, even sort of, how do you get the best financial advice? How does, a mortgage work? What's the best process when it comes to buying a house and saving money, and what are the different asset classes that you can maybe invest in, or what's the best way to even open a bank account? These basics in terms of financial literacy, of how to protect, preserve, and to manage your money, no matter how much you have of it or how little you have of it. That needs to be a more central theme, or at least a more, it needs to be more included in education curriculums at a younger age. That's my feeling, because those from a more disadvantaged socioeconomic background have far less financial literacy than those who do not. And the question is why? It's because, unfortunately, not only because it's not included in the curriculum, it's because they do not have the same exposure to certain programs, or to certain even conversations that provide them with insights. And that's not fair. That's unequal. Yes. That goes against the premise of equal opportunity. You're supposed to provide everyone with the same information about how to manage your future, and how to manage your wealth, and how to protect your wealth, so that in the future, when you're in a position where you get your first job, you get your first paycheck, or you make your first investment, you know what to do. You have a good idea of what you have to do. And even the key terms of finance, right? The jargon that comes with finance. It shouldn't matter what education level you have, or which socioeconomic background you come from. You're supposed to be provided that information, and you're supposed to know that information. So I'm curious to get your ideas, Manish, and maybe the audience at some point. In India, if you maybe, for example, whether it's in the UK or India, if you don't have formal education at school, I mean, number one, is it taught at schools? And number two, if you do not have formal education, if you maybe did not go to school, or finish school early, or dropped out of school, where can you get that education from when it comes to financial literacy? Is it readily available? And has the government maybe thought of creative ways of providing that financial literacy education, which, by the way, the whole world needs to work on. So, but I'm curious to how it's going in India.
Well, you made a nice point on protect, reserve, and manage. These all three need to be, practiced to the fullest possible extent. And each one is interrelated. And coming to, managing money is the third one, the point which you made. Yes, people are able to earn wealth to a certain degree, but problem is managing money. A big problem. People don't know how to manage money. Many of them, especially the ones who are below the poverty line. One example comes of my own house help. One day she walked in the house, and she came with a long face, and my wife asked her, how come, you seem to be sad today? So what's going on? Within minutes she said, I hope you won't mind if I reveal the truth. She said, you would be surprised. We have better television, better fridge, and better mobile in our home as compared to you who hire us. So my wife had a smile. So she asked her, then what's the problem? You have all these three things better, because see, we believe in a concept of utility is the principle. If I know my XYZ certain degree of phone is working fine and it meets my needs, I don't care, going for a high-end phone, because it doesn't meet if my needs are met with a reasonably priced phone. Why should I buy a state-of-the-art phone when I don't have the need for it? So I always keep this principle in mind. Utility is the principle. If I don't have the utility for the extra features XYZ, they might appear fancy, trendy. I won't go for it because I don't have use for it. So my wife just smiled, and then she said, then what's the problem if you are using these things? We have no problem. She said, see, that the problem is my son bought all these three things on EMI. So then she asked, yeah, so EMI, yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. Everybody buys things on EMI. She said, there's no problem with EMI. Now, the problem is he's lost his job and there are some goons who are after us because people who are in bottom of the line and the bottom of pyramid, banks don't send white collar recovery agents to recover money. They send goons, the local goons, to recover money. It's a different thing which is followed at a ground or at that level. Although we might talk about diversity, inclusion, we have different rules for different customers. And that's pretty prevalent. So she's saying now they are becoming a pain in the butt. Now, how should we handle them? They're saying, if you don't pay by so-and-so date, if you don't pay your EMI, we'll do this, we'll do that, we will do this. So she was in tears. We lent her some money so she can take care of her needs. But then we realized that people, I mean, in Hindi, they used to say, right, Amdani Attani Kharcha Rupaiya. I mean, your income is rupees 50 and you end up spending 100 rupees. And then you take debt and the debt starts piling up, and then you don't know how to repay that debt. You never think of eventualities in your life. So one is to get into the debt, another is managing debt. So this is an additional two things which I would like to bring, because these all also should be part of financial literacy. Because if they don't know how to manage money, the third point which Basim made, they'll be, in fact, while making money, I mean, in spite of making money, they'll be heading into a zone which would be an unpalatable zone. And this needs to be addressed. Now, who can address this? I feel the best people who can address this. Now, who is employing these people. There are millions of people across the country. Since you mentioned that, your this year's social agenda is financial freedom. I feel every household who employs people who are from bottom of the pyramid, give them some educational material, or, do some educational kind of, create some series and give them a job, or, run a campaign whereby they take part and they share that, today I spent 30 minutes with a person in the bottom of the pyramid who works with me. Either that could be a driver, it could be a house help, it could be a maid, XYZ, or someone who washes your car. I spend 30 minutes to, give them a, walk them through these certain basic elements. Because yes, we realize that yes, government should play a role. I mean, but government, how far and wide can the government go? Because when government, allocates budget for certain things, they hire or they allocate responsibility to many people. But are those people efficient? People who are part of rank and file, are they aligned to the vision, the greater vision of the government? To me, answer is no. Because I mean, I have seen myself in the bank. I mean, couple of banks in India. When I speak in Hindi, they talk to you with, the language which you get from the other side, or the body language, is very different as compared to when you speak in English. When you walk in a bank with a suit, nicely dressed, like Basim is nicely dressed, I mean, they'll give him a red carpet. And if I go with this t-shirt, the pink color t-shirt where I'm trying to promote the universal love and it represents many other things, harmony, I would be looked down upon because they'll feel this guy is not a high flyer like Basim. So, and this is a ground reality. This is a ground reality. This is a ground reality. So in addition to, while addressing this, we need to also address the people who are running the system, because even they need to change with changing times.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. So Basim, I have one question for you. With respect to China, there have been a lot of political developments recently, with the government coping with a lot of criticism because of their actions during and pre-pandemic. Further, the Chinese government's actions have indirect repercussions on global stock markets. So given that many have touted the 21st century to be the Asian century and the central role of China in that, where do you think it stands in the global financial market? And what do you think the future holds for it?
That's very good question. First of all, China is a second biggest economy in the world. Huge economy, massive export nation. What they've achieved over the last 30 to 40 years in terms of lifting those out of poverty, growing their economy, being able to develop a capitalist system within a communist political system, has been nothing short of remarkable. And I think we can all recognize that, and we should all agree. And I think an economically prosperous China is good for the world. I think it's worth noting that we see a lot of things in the news about China, whether it's criticism, whether it's achievements. I think it is worth noting that on an economic and political basis, because there's always concerns about, is there a lot of, between the US and China and concerns, and is there potential conflict, etc. I think it's worth noting, putting my political analysis hat on, that the US and China and the UK and China, and sort of broadly speaking, the West and China, but focusing on the US now, they have a much more understanding, diplomatic relationship than is often appreciated. Even though, when you see the two biggest countries in the world, economically speaking, coming head to head on certain issues, you get a bit nervous, right? But the truth, and obviously two massive military powers as well. But the truth is that it speaks volumes about the interconnectedness of this world and how interlinked we are, that even two countries that are to a certain degree rivals, and they have competition between each other, the US and China, but they collaborate behind the scenes on a whole range of issues. And this is why when people ask me, oh, well, when's the next, is World War III going to happen? Is there going to be calamity? I always say no. And the reason is, whether it's US China or US Russia, but obviously the purpose of the discussion, China, there's a lot of discussions and cooperation behind the scenes. The Chinese hold massive investments in the United States. They hold huge amounts of treasury bonds. They send tens of thousands of their students to the United States to study. There are huge educational exchanges. There's a huge admiration for the US and China, and there's admiration of China and the United States amongst its people. So I think it's worth to just step back from a macro perspective and say, okay, there are criticisms, like you mentioned. There are tensions, as we see in the media every day, between the US and China. But let's not forget that the world is so interconnected that even if we might disagree with each other, and we might actually have fights, and we actually, on a long-term basis, will probably have a lot of tension, we can still be business-like and get things done. The US and China, for example, they might disagree on trade relations, but they work together to try to counter North Korea, for example. They work together very closely after the financial crisis to try to stabilize the global economy. They work together on issues like climate change. So I think that's one point. On the second point, I think China is going through two transitions at the moment. Number one, China is going from an economy that's focused only on exporting, right? Just manufacturing and exporting, to actually focusing on the domestic markets. I think they realize that obviously, China is a huge population, like India. They have a growing middle class. They have a population with more and more spending power. So they're thinking, why should we only simply export our stuff outside? Why don't we focus more on the internal markets? So that's one trend. And the second trend is balancing from a society that's focusing purely on just pure economic growth and expansion to more common prosperity. That's a theme that China is focusing on, focusing a little bit more on perhaps redistribution, on trying to give those that are a bit less well off with more means, and trying to create a more equal society. And obviously that will give consumers more money as well in the middle class, lower to middle class, or working to middle class, more means to actually spend and to become consumers. So that's my thoughts on the China question, and obviously a huge player and will play a huge role. But I am positive when it comes to the interlinked nature of our world. That makes it very difficult to just not want to talk about stuff and get things done, because You have, you're interlinked, so you have to talk and you have to get things done, which is good.
Right, sir.
Sorry
Thank
for
you
my
so
long,
much for
sorry for
sharing
my
your
long-winded
thoughts.
answer.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this. Mr. Manish, sir, the next question is for you. Given your experience in branding, I wanted to understand how important is the branding and advertising of schemes like the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, especially in rural areas where people are often resistant to change and fearful of the consequences of entering schemes, which in reality, in the long run, will be beneficial for them. So my question would be, do you feel that this is something that the current government in power has done well to ensure greater financial freedom through the schemes?
I think, see, the intent of the scheme, as I said earlier, I mean, one is that the intent of the scheme is good because at the top level, there are people who have done good amount of research. I mean, it's not overnight planned schemes that, one fine day they think of, oh, we should have this scheme. There is a lot of research which goes, and Basim would agree with me, the amount of research and thought leaders who are onboarded for this, like Basim and many others, who advise the government, you should be looking into this matter, and these are the XYZ things you can do, and this is the way you can launch your scheme. So that the intent is good at the top level. Now the thing is, when it comes to branding, I feel, the branding in terms of, more, I mean, one of the leaders, I mean, who enlightened me in 2012, when it comes to marketing and branding. I mean, he made a powerful statement in the World Marketing Congress. He was invited as the keynote speaker, and the message he gave was, marketing is not about the product, it's about the culture in which product is marketed, product or service, whatever it is. So that culture is very important. It's not that, I mean, we have this fancy banner, we have this fancy ad going XYZ places. I mean, nukkad nataks and other things, but going at the ground level to check, I mean, at times we feel one size fits all, one message fits all, everybody will get it. It doesn't work that. I mean, at the ground level, checking with people, I mean, do you understand? And if you are not going ahead with this, what's the reason behind it? So working in reverse way, I mean, to create, because the whole purpose is, I mean, if you want to achieve purpose, we need to involve people in the system, involve people who are rank and file. And I'm glad this 26th January, I mean, when I came across a message, I mean, the invitation was extended for the first time in the history of India to people who drive rickshaws, people who sweep the streets of India. I mean, these are the people who were invited to be part of the Republic Day celebration. Hats off whoever thought of, whoever gave that idea to the PMO office or whoever, I mean, through the president's office. I mean, it requires a lot of, I mean, I'm glad that finally things are changing. So when you involve them, I mean, rather than having, people like, or celebrities as brand ambassadors, pick up celebrities from ground level, whom these people will be able to resonate with and share their stories, how this has helped them evolve in their journey. Because at the end of the day, we know word of mouth is powerful. People buy looking at people's experiences.
Yes, sir.
So how
Thank
we
you
are
so
able
much.
to create, I mean, in every village, I mean, you can create different kind of brand ambassadors, leverage on their power, how they have evolved their story, localize it. And India is anyways made of different countries, right? I mean, we have so many languages. Basim in the initial discussion said, oh, I'm so fascinated, so many languages, so many religions, so much diversity. Leverage on the element of diversity. Different shloks to different folks, like different messages, different to different people, and involve the people from ground level to create those messages and stories for you. And I think we can reach to greater heights.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much to the both of you. This has been truly a stimulating conversation. Audience is eager to ask you a few questions, so I'll read them out to you. Yes, sir. So the first question from the audience is that freedom of time is defined as the ability to choose where to spend your time and who to spend your time with. This is often linked to financial freedom. How much overlap do you think exists between the two ideas? And do you think one of them leads to the other one? Mr. Basim, would you like to take this?
So freedom, the freedom to have time, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, my feeling is that you often need this the time and the headspace, and I'm sure Manish has much more insights on this, but I just feel like when you have the time and you have the space to think, when you're in your daily life and you're grinding and you're working, you're very, very unlikely able to step back and think of something very creative. It's possible, but from my personal experience, sometimes you need that space, that time to be able to detach slightly and to think about an initiative or an issue or something maybe you want to start, etc. So from an entrepreneurial point of view, sometimes it benefits when you are, for example, maybe you're studying and you don't have, maybe you don't have class every day, so you have, a bit more time to think, or maybe you're on holiday. I think having that time to think and that freedom of time to think and to come up with solutions, I think is very important. Now, you're right in linking the two. The problem we see today, there's it'll be interesting to see on the statistics on this, but those that are from more privileged backgrounds, those that come from backgrounds where they have financial support, where they have financial means, have more time to then accumulate more wealth by coming up with new initiatives and coming up with new businesses, etc. Those that are living from paycheck to paycheck, those that are unemployed, those that are going through huge financial stress and are living in this, living in the realities of economic inequality, do not have the time often, or they are not in the right frame of mind to come up with new business ideas, etc., to start or to take that leap of faith, because it is simply much, much, much more difficult and not as realistic for them to do so because of time constraints and because of financial restraints. So they're all linked. Again, it comes to the topic of equal opportunity, and it comes to the topic of conditions. Many of us are born into conditions that are more favorable than others. There's a famous political philosopher, his name was John Rawls, and he basically said, you're born into a condition. You're born into, if you had to close your eyes and think of, of all the different countries and different, you could have been born a different gender, you could have been born in different life circumstance, you could have been born in a war-torn country, you could have been born in a peacetime country. There's so many different scenarios that you could have been born into. It's by, largely by chance. So why not create a system which provides equal opportunity for all? Because in the end of the day, where we were, in what life opportunity and what life chance we were born into is largely obviously based on luck. So yeah, I think we need to try to create a system which provides equal opportunity for those across different backgrounds. And yeah, unfortunately, those that have more financial resources, that come from more privileged backgrounds, have more freedom of time, which means they will be able to accumulate more financial wealth as well.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question from the audience. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. The next question from the audience would be, many times financial freedom appears to be synonymous with having enough money when you retire. How do you think that pension schemes and provident funds contribute to this phenomenon? Mr. Manish, would you like to take this?
Sure. See, now the thing is, yes, there are good schemes. Pension schemes and many other schemes, retirement plans are very good. Now, provided, you have factored in the inflation, the amount of inflation we experience in the country. Otherwise, what happened if you invest from a present perspective, 20 years down the line, that money might not make much sense to you. So incorporate, inflation perspective into it. And I would say, more than that, move into the area of sustainable living. Because I see many people living in fear. Oh shit, what will happen? We are entering a gig economy. I don't know how long I'll have my job. I might be fired. They might put me on contract. A short-term contract might not last too long. What after that? What is going to be next in my life? I've been used to being in a comfort zone like a mama's baby. But now all these things will go away with the gig economy coming up. Then how will I survive? So a lot of people are living in a state of fear, from people from top level to the people at the shop floor, because in shop floor they are thinking about automation and XYZ thing. In this kind of scenario, the pension plan, all these things are good, which are there in the place. But now the question is, will these guys will be able to pay premium in the following years if they lose their jobs? That's a question mark. It's a big question mark to be addressed. And now you're talking about 20 years pension plan. I mean, you don't even know. Earlier, companies used to have 5 years plan. Now they've stopped planning for 5 years. They plan for 6 months or max 1 year. But they don't know what's going to change in the next 1 year or 2 years. So in this kind of a very volatile environment, where there's huge amount of uncertainty with the entire world is experiencing, with all kinds of disruption taking place. In this kind of environment, although these schemes sound very good, but from a long-term basis, I mean, sustaining it or being more realistic, asking this question, will you be able to pay premium? And if you have answers to it, then yes. But a better solution to address a larger problem, which is about retirement, or which many people fear, would be to move towards sustainable living. I mean, a few years ago, I worked on the prototype of creating a house. Which was made out of sustainable elements, and we recycled, we sun-dried coconut shells, we leveraged on about a good amount of sizable number of coconut shells which get dumped into garbage, and the local corporation helped us, and we created a prototype in a way that every brick is made out of a shell which grows a little amount of food. And the ceiling is made of solar, whereby your light is taken care of, your basic necessities are taken care of. Now I feel if we scale it up, or if we make this home bigger and make it sustainable, I mean, water harvesting, there are plenty of techniques now. If you are focusing on sustainable living, I mean, then if I am retired, I'm living countryside. Countryside is anyways in India is a lot cheaper than living in these big congested cities, where quality of life is in any case deteriorating. So when you move out from that kind of environment, I think this would be a far more superior plan which you're creating, where you are, at least you didn't experience a quality life during your lifetime living in the congested environment. At least towards your end, you could live a nice, relaxed, comfortable life. And with this, I think with telemedicine and other things taking off, even in villages now, you have access to good doctors using technology. So I think if they work towards this direction, plan it better. And lastly, and in addition to this, although these plans are good, there's something called reverse mortgage, which is yet to take off in India. Reverse mortgage has not yet taken off in India. I mean, we have grown up a system like, we care about our children and grandchildren. We care the least about our own selves. I mean, this concept is an amazing concept, whereby people mortgage their home, and the bank, they can tell the bank, you can deduct the money, and after I die, the amount I owe you, you collect it from my children if they're interested in taking over the property, and let them take over after that, or whoever it would be, a trust or something, wherever they want to donate that property or whatever they want to do. So I think these elements would play a game-changing role, and I think we will see them pick up in the coming years.
Thank you so much, sir. I wish we could continue this conversation longer, but due to time constraints, we'd end here. I would once again like to thank the both of you for joining us today. I hope everyone who joined this discussion enjoyed it as much as I did. A huge thank you to the both of you for joining, and I would like to call Mr. Avik Chokani to give the vote of thanks for today.
I'd like to take this opportunity to record our thanks to our speakers for today, Mr. Manish Advani and Mr. Basim, who took time out of their busy schedule to help us explore the idea of freedom further. I'd further also like to thank our wonderful audience members for attending and sending in questions, which facilitated the discussion and assisted our understanding. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today.
With pleasure. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Pleasure. Have a great weekend ahead.
You too, Manish. Thank you.
Bye.